I will. Okay. Probably I will say whether I accept it or reject it. But if I do not say anything, you can just assume that I reject it. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in three, two, one. Roses are red, violets are blue, Drake's on the rise, but some is what's true. Okay, in my speech, I will explain to why the regrets happening of the rising of the drag culture in mainstream media. But first, we have to clarify some things to make sure the debate do not goes to anywhere. First, our stances as the Gov is not too anti-drag, but we think that the drag culture in mainstream media itself is harmful. We think that drag culture is okay, but we do not think putting drag culture in mainstream media is okay. That's the thing. But secondly, what is the mainstream media? I think mainstream media is something that is that mass could uh, consume it without hassle. For example, if you are watching RuPaul's Drag Race, for example, or other drag race that you could provide in your YouTube or etc., that is not consumable for your own only your community. So we think that mainstream media is also the media that could open to a lot of society. But but moving on to my arguments and also the status quo. I think why we think that the rise of the why we think that we regret the rising, because first I think the rise is happening before there is the political power where within the drag culture and also the trans movement. I think that that is harmful because you are pushing the drag cultural in the world where people are hating you. People are hating you. People are putting bad stereotyping on you. People are condemn you. So I think that puts a lot of social pressure on you. But it's not only social pressure, but also the law pressure. Because here's the thing: because there is no political stance, there is no political power. No, there is not enough political power. That's what makes you as the drag cultures become more fragile. Why? Because what first we think that in mainstream media that tries to portray the drag cultures, for example like RuPaul's and also etc., creates some exploitation without structural support. We think that these drag performers gain temporary fame from being drags, but the industry offers little long-term support. For example, mental health, job security, and healthcare. Probably you could say some of the name like I forgot in Indonesia there is like the drug that happen in the long-term support, but I think that's only cherry picking and also only the best case. But in the reality, in the general case, there's only few people that get long-term support from doing the drag performance because there's no political power to provide you the job as the drag. Not like when you become the artist of the reality show, like the other dating reality show. They are being dijamin uh, the job so you can rest assured. But in being the drag performance is different. And then friends and networks benefit while the drag community still faces legal and physical threats. Here's the thing: we think that there maybe in your work there will be like friends and networks and etc. that will support you, but that only comes with the mainstream media itself, and there's no political power from only gaining the fans. While in doing that, you also put the tracks on your drag performance. For example, in US there is a drag anti laws, by pushing the agenda for treating the drug cultures in mainstream media, while you do not change the anti-drug laws, that is harmful. We do not want to create the harmful to our community, where the trans or maybe the drag that do not have the stable jobs or do not even shown in the media have the threat of being social punished by the people and also by the law. And I think the rise has a threat translated into safety or equality to the drag performance of the queer community because of that reasons. And second, while I already explained to you what happening in the political stance, I will tell you how the drag actually commercialized in the media. Drag in the media uses to create the awareness. I think that's what the opposition might to say. But the awareness that created by the drag cultural is harmful actually, because you want to capitalize and also you want to make it marketable. So you have to see what's the pattern that you can go to your general society. What's the pattern? Stereotyping. That's the thing. If you're seeing the RuPaul Drag Race, you can see that there are a lot of bad stereotyping. For example, no, thank you. Okay. For example, drag or trans tends to love someone else. Like you will fall in love immediately with the man, even if in the reality it's not. You're going to be just chill. I think if you are just being in the general reality show like the straight one, you probably don't think that this is true. But you are facing in the world where the stereotyping is really high. So this is going to pursue this kind of stereotyping furthermore. So we think that we try to pray at our worst case scenario, okay? Maybe in our side of the house, there will, because we regret this, maybe there will be less awareness of trans. But we think this is the good threat, because rather than pursuing an unhealthy discussion like the opposition might say, that might further promote stereotyping of drag, like crazy love to chase every man and etc., putting the trans in the danger of the bullying or other due to this bad stereotyping. But second, I think we already have Pride Month, Rainbow Demonstrate, and etc. that holds political agenda rather than drag cultural in mainstream media. So we think that this is already enough for us, and we can use it to push the political first before we put the drag cultures in the mainstream media right now. So we still give a safe place for trans and drag that hasn't really coming out to the society right now. So that's why we're proud to be the government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Prime Minister.
Okay, am I audible? Audible nggak ya?
Yeah, you're audible.
TOI chat box aja ya guys. Thank you. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Directly, I think that they have two things that mainly discusses in their argumentation that our responses. Firstly, I think they say that, oh, our life, it's not that good because at the end of the day, drag have no political power. So at the end of it, if that backfire you, you have no check and balances and etc. I think several responses. I think they said like, oh, drag community and also drag culture like come to mainstream media like it's forced in order to adapting and etc. But we think that it is something that naturally happen because people start to like it, so it can enter the media. It start to be FYP, for example. So more people knows about it in the very first place because people give the likes and also shares and etc. This is shows you that it is not something that too extreme, like they said under the side of the house already told you. But second of all, I think people do not really understand about drag and etc. that might be like homophobics and etc. might not going to be like interact even that more. Why so? Because there is this algorithm. If you do not like it, then it's not going to be always showing in your FYP and etc. Because at the end of the day, even though true, they are going to mock you and etc. It's in their own echo chamber. It's not going to be like going into something that you might be like have a backfire and etc. But thirdly, I think that taking a power in terms of political is we need to push more political power by showing that we are access in the very first place. Like if drag as in general existing in the mainstream media and people start to like it, then there is these forces in order to support us. If you like us, then support us. And also there is this like the internalized empathy, for example, to signing a petition and etc. This is something that protect even more and also give more advocacy toward those drag community at the end of the day. Second of all, they say that, oh, it puts stereotyping into a drag community because at the end of the day, oh, it's too radical and etc. But I think in the current status quo, general society already seen like a drag queen and also drag community is something that needs to be radical, crazy, liberal, and etc. Pushing they start to pushing and also like stereotyping drag queen as crazy and etc. But I think that because it comes to the mainstream media and it is something that adapting as a more simple etc., it shows that drag and also drag community comes with a spectrum. It doesn't always something that really crazy and etc. because it is also can be like small culture, like showing your costume or maybe like making your wig even more like good and etc. This is something that we engage more in the spectrum of how you are not going to stereotyping, but even deep down to their community. I have two argumentation. Firstly, why we need drag culture in mainstream media to humanize drag community. But second of all, why it is something that important for queer community. Firstly, why we need the drag queen in the mainstream media to humanize the drag community. So what is the current status quo looks like and the perception of today's drag queen looks like? I think the status quo like people see drag as only like shows. It is something that only performances and also they are the one that equals to clown and etc. But second of all, I think also people think that drag is something that separated might not be your identity, so they will like more likely to be invalidate. Meanwhile, there is this drag queen that more likely like it is their identity. It is something that daily life they do it in the very first place. Why then mainstream media can shift the meaning of the drag culture in the very first place? Three reasons. Firstly, people start seeing it is not only a performances. It is about the preparation. It is about the value, hard work, dedication, like showing their costume before they are like going to the mainstream media or the story behind their costume or what they show and etc. This is something that going to be shown when it comes to mainstream media in the very first place. But second of all, because it is exposed by the media, people right now will be understanding that this drag queen might be consistently using this as their identity. So people start to understand that it is something that cannot be separated by the person. But thirdly, I think it will be like dive deeper to the community perspective. Like there is this drag house, for example, the sense of community that is like mother of the house as a coaches and etc. It gives you more rooms in order to talk that drag it's not that simple. But even further, it shows like in daily life, for example, they are becoming like social media users, like Get Ready With Me and etc. and other influencer. It shows you that they are also the normal human being. It starts to make us to humanize them in the very first place. The second argumentation then, why this is something that important for queer community in the very first place. Look, how is the history of the drag queen that existing right now? I think like the idea of drag is exaggerating forms of gender expression. So for a really long time, drag is used by like, okay, straight people, cheesehead, homophobes to mocking LGBTQIA community. But not only that, it is also used to imitate women and also refer it as a comedian, etc. Why this representation? It is something that important to be used in the media because three reasons. Firstly, it reclaims and showing you it is their culture, and this is something that they need to be proud of. It is not something that you to be ashamed of in the very first place. This is represented by the true community, by their own true community. But second of all, reclamation only can be success if the show if you can show to the real oppressor that already oppress you for a really long time that you're not ashamed anymore with your own culture. This is something that we want to show to you at the end of the day. This is our culture that you already use for comedy and also mocking, but we're not already ashamed anymore about this kind of thing. But thirdly, I think like it creates a bigger safe place because there is like new community that can be accessible for everyone. I think like a lot of people that might be like drag that might not be have like more access and also spotlight will understand that they are not alone in the very first place. But why? But how it will be like manifesting and looks like? I think like the idea of culture that drag queen already existing right now is like yes queen and also ballroom and etc. I think it shows you that our own culture is something that already normalized by you, and we want to reclaim and makes you understand. But because this is something that already normalized, you need to also normalize all the general terms of the culture itself. I think that we cannot regret these things because the culture is already like fusion to the general culture in mainstream media. When this rise happening, we cannot regret this because it creates more discussion and also creates more engagement towards the community in order to understand them even more, in order to dive deep down into the details of the culture that might not be shown and also do not have spotlight for a really long time. This is something that we proud.
Okay, thank you for that, Leader of Opposition. Spend 7 minutes and 13 seconds. To continue, let's welcome DPM. Here.
Check. Am I audible?
Yep, audible.
Okay. Let me just set my timer. POI, just raise your hand. Please do not unmute yourself. Okay. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panels, before I'm moving into my extension, the opposition have two main points, right? The first one is about the humanized community, and the second one is about their representation to be exist in a community. Okay, let's break down what's opposition's argument and see how we engage with them. The first one, the drag culture has humanized the queer and also the drag community. People used to see them as the clownish performance, and now they can understand about it more. We agree that in ideal world, it's visible to could lead the understanding about their community, right? But the reality is the mainstream media still present drag and exaggerated performatives and even in more comedic ways, largely in for more only for entertainment. Most audiences they don't get engaged deeply with drag culture or even more historical or even the real context. Instead, they see it as a flashy costumes, dramas, all the uh, uh, um all the all the performance, which is like reinforced and also not reducing the clown stereotype. This often leads into like misunderstand them or even like make them not humanization at the end of the day. Even when the drag performance are shown as a real people, it's within a competitive or like a scripted in reality show format where vulnerability is often dramatized for ratings, not for empathy, right? So I think these kinds of popularization that the drag community getting is not helping them at the end of the day, right? And also they say that it will help people that realize their identity and like starting to talk about them. This assumes everyone benefits equally from the drag arise, which is we think that this is not true. The version of drag most visible today is very specific and often like cheese male, an able body, and aligned with a Western beauty standard. This does not reflect the full spectrums of queer identity, especially for people that for trans people, non-binary folks, and for asexuals individual. In fact, when drag becomes the default representations of the queerness, it can be confusing for to other LGBT community. Those identity are not performative or glamorous. Instead, it of encouraging people to conversations, this can limit public understanding of the queerness, just like one expressions of like the drag showing in mainstream media, right? So and also they're talking about they're talking about the representations, right? The representation, well, at least people can notice their exist at the first place. Well, we say that the representation can be more harmful and can be misleading. The over representation of a single subgroup, for example, like this drag community, are only like one part of the rainbow community. When drag becomes like most dominant or more the most feasible forms of the queer representation in media, it like creates a false image that being queer means being loud, performative, and even maybe like glamorous. This overshadows the diverse reality in the community, such as like queer people who are maybe introvert, disabled, asexual, and so on and so forth. And also like the representation does not equal to empowerment. Just because the group as appears on screen does not mean they are being represented like accurately and respectfully. Much of the mainstream drag media is created by cooperation whose goal is profit, not social change. The result is a shallow representation where drag performers are used to entertain, but their voices are limited. They struggle by being ignored, and their identity reduced into a stereotypical assumption in society, right? Moving into my extension, we say that this 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 rise of the drag representation in the mainstream, it will harm border to queer representation and also like physical and community impact. Many drag performance enter entertainment into mainstream hoping for success, but the industry is like unforgiving. It prioritizes popularity, image, marketability, and also like the drag artists are under a pressure to constantly perform and fit a certain mold. Many suffer from burnout or even like anxiety, financial insecurity, and so on. And worse, when a mainstream fans or media turns against them to move on, these performers are left behind without the safety nets or protection that is truly supportive industry should be like offers. That's why we want them to have like a political insurance first, the political agenda secure first before they really rise into the mainstream media, because we see that it will be even harmful for their community. Basically, we just want them to be safe at the very first place, right? And also like the mainstream media does not help normalize the queer culture and build acceptance. We agree that the visibility can maybe powerful, but not all visibility are good. What's happening in very narrow kinds of visibility, like the drag queens represented as a flashy and entertaining way for mainstream audiences. It does not challenge existing system. In fact, it often comfort them. This kind of media exposure does not stop the anti-drag legislation, does not improve the queer healthcare, and does not reduce the hate crimes at the end of the day. And also like the drag challenge gender norms and promotes the diversity. We don't see this is coming, because at the end of the day, we know that the community will be harmful at the end of the day. So at the end, we believe that we create regret the rise of the drag culture in mainstream, not because we're rejecting the drag, but because we care about them. The current form of the mainstreaming this drag culture is basically just diluting and also distorting and even exploiting them what once a space of empowerment and also resistance. It harms the performance, also misinterprets the community, and reduces the queerness to make um, the community. That's why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, DPM spent 7 minutes and 25 seconds. To continue, let's welcome DLO. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, audible.
Okay, hold on. Uh, Gender pronoun she, they, or just refer to me as DLO. POI, please just raise your hand or unmute. I won't be seeing the chat. Wait, stopping my time. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I don't understand why proposition tried to put queer community against drag's community, because even the most conservative person possible, they would see both of these community as a one spectrum community. So I don't understand what is the harm when drags is being highlighted and then they told you that queer community is going to be left out, right? Because then if they were to prove that point, they have to explain in the very first place why drags does not align with queer community's objectives, for examples, right? Which they never explain, by the way. So that was only a claim, but I'm also going to explain further to you as to why, for example, this is going to also be beneficial not only for like drags community, but like queer individuals in the very first place. All rebuttals will be integrated. Two things that I will present in my substantive. Number one, talking about how does mainstreaming of drag cultures benefit the opportunities for drags and to a certain extent queer community, and then also secondly, how mainstreaming of drag cultures lead to self-validations of queer or drags individuals. Number one, I'm going to talk about what kind of media that highlight drag cultures, because propositions always talk it in a very, very raw manner, like, oh, media that is going to highlight most likely, according to like propositions characterizations, are going to be like, oh, right, very conservative media, right? But we don't think so, because number one, we think that the very first media that is going to like highlight these particular drag cultures, this is going to be started with like a leftist media, a media that is already woke, for example, a media that is more aware of WGM community, right? Those media that understand how careful they should be to address drag cultures or queer communities, right? But secondly, why media that is rather conservative, like what they characterize to you, most likely wouldn't badger the safety net of drag communities discussions. Number one, Raka already told you, if there were an insult coming from like majority, usually it's only perpetuated in a forum that consists of people who are conservative anyway, right? So people who would like to give like mean comments, for example, usually starts to throw mean comments because there are people within that forum who creates a post about like conservativeness towards like these drags community to begin with, right? That's why this is not going to meddle with like the discussions within the drag community in itself, because they cannot just told you that this is going to erase the entire existence of queer communities or drag cultures discussions. But secondly, we contest to you that currently there are media that is, for example, try to be more open to like progressive things that is more centrist, right? For example, how RuPaul is invited by Jimmy Fallon, for example. This also means, by the way, that there is support from both coming from individuals from like queer communities or like drag communities, and also his individual that is more aware as to why drag or queen or king is just important, right? As a person, for example, because this wouldn't exist without any demand coming from like supporters of like audience. This is one thing that they never characterize to you. This is also the implications of Raka's arguments that talks about why mainstreaming of drag influencer within Instagram, for example, that do get ready with me video is important because it humanizes to you that being drag, makeup like drags and everything is burdensome, which leads to my third point, directly catering to point about burnout coming from proposition sides. I don't this makes sense at all because then if they were to say, being a drag is very burnout, very burdensome, they have to explain the process of thoughts that is acquired by this drags individual. We think the very first reasons why drags want to dress like so, why they create like get ready with me video in like Instagram and whatnot, is that for them to show I'm never exhausted to dress this way because this is the way I am. What they want is that for people to accept that they're not being extra for other people, that being extra for themselves, right? This is why what they talk to you about burnout is most likely the thought of like majoritarian community who doesn't acquire direct identity, for example, in which is a very mismatched characterizations because they often characterize the drag individuals' characterizations. But secondly, why is this beneficial to drags? Number one, we context to you that the mainstreaming of drag cultures are going to subconsciously change the thoughts of like mainstream audience. Take a look of like House of Raminten in Yogyakarta, for example, where drag performance performs in front of I don't know how many types of like audience that came to the event. It was like a restaurant, by the way. It's not like a specifically drag club, but like everyone comes there and subconsciously do not directly judge that they are drags, for example. They're not like cis individual. I hate it. No, but they subconsciously see it as an entertaining form of art, for examples, right? Which leads to my second point as to how jobs or like opportunity for drag individuals is inherently also going to be better because on their side of the house, if they want to remain exclusive, most likely they're only going to be invited by small portions of media who are only willing, for example, to like invite or reports about drag cultures. But under our side of the house, we agree that we are going to, for example, open more opportunity like for these drag individuals because we also agree that there are also going to be people who are going to be like wanting to like there are going to be people like who are more progressive who like demand this like particular centrist media, for example, to talk about drag cultures, right? Even though it is not as like largely accepted by like the entire majority because like it's gonna be a long time process, and this is one of the process that is also a matter for that cultures. But thirdly, impact like political climate. Number one, I just want to point out that proposition has had to provide the counterfactual on their side of the house, like why staying repressed on their side would likely be better. But firstly, we think that currently politics is no longer monolithic, right? There are the rise of like political centrism, even though they do not directly highlight queer or drags, but at least they're willing to compromise with like a more leftist movement or like more progressive movement such as queer or drags community. But secondly, in order for you to be listened, you also have to be visible since the very get-go. That's why back then LGBTQ communities are very repressed because politics are not wanting to represent leftist value, for example. This is why the political centrism benefit our side of the house, right? Lastly, why mainstreaming would be beneficial for individual. Number one, even if there is sanitations of like drags community and media mass, for example, we don't think it's gonna be that severe, right? Because even if it is watered down literally to like a more mainstream media and mainstream audiences, it requires an insult of the ego to the majority, either to acknowledge that it is drag community coming from queer cultures, or to be called out that you are racist for not, or not xenophobic for like not acknowledging queer community. Hence why we think that there are process as to how it is not going to be as harmful as what propositions portray to you. Vote for opposition.
Okay, thank you for that. DLO spent 7 minutes and 45 seconds. Please be mindful of your time. And to continue the case from government, I will welcome government whip. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, audible.
Hello, judges. Can I allow to be having like seconds? I think I want to poke.
Okay, I'll give you like
Sorry,
2
sorry, sorry.
minutes.
Okay, hello, judges. Thank you for the time. Okay, let me stop my timer. My POI preference is just the same as my last speech. Okay. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think we have to wrap up the debate. Okay, I think the main clash that we are talking about is how each team tried to win the game or win the power. By the government, we want to make it as the political first, such as you are joining the Pride Month, you are joining the Pride demonstrate, or a rainbow demonstrate, or etc. The current that helps the political agenda. In the upside, they want to try to not regret the drag cultures and etc. because this is gaining the power of awareness and also people aware of that. Okay, I think first there are a lot of they state that it's okay because there is like a lot of mocking that happening because drag culturals that happen that only in echo chamber in conservative area and also in majority power. But this is the more harmful that we do not want to happen because here's the thing, likely or not, if you want to make a political safety, you have to pass the law. You have to make it clear that you are the safe community. If the majority do not win you, if they are mocking you, they are thinking that you are not safe, that's that's making your progression become worse because in majority and also in the inside of echo chamber there are political power that holds into it, that holds account to it, and we do not want to make this majority becomes more hatred to you. And we think that this awareness only happen if you already hold political power first, which is in the Pride Month. The current of the example of the opposition example actually happened because in America already have Pride Month. They push the political agenda so they could have the RuPaul's drag race that have probably more safety environment rather than Indonesia or etc. We think that that's only happened because there is the progression of political power at the very first place. But so that's why we do not want to think that we should push to the rising the drag cultures first before the political agenda. And also the second one, they also said that by making it into the mainstream idea, it can create the changes in the meaning of the trans or also the drags agenda. But I think this is not going to be exclusive in both sides, and I think in their sides it's going to be more harmful because what it only the changes in the meaning if you do not have any political power only able to be grasped by the community itself, by the one that do not help the stereotyping. And without validity, the legal validity, you do not have this kind of power. What happened in the let's because if you do not have any validity or legal validity or political power, the one that will get to the mass or the general society is the popular one that gets problem, bad stereotyping, and there's no political agenda in that bad stereotyping. But if you have the political power at the very first place, it's going to be more broad. For example, if you put it in the Thailand, it that already legalized it, you can say that it will become more popularized. While you do not being framed as the criminal, as the one that should banish in the society. And even more, Thailand actually promotes transsexual health. And also, you can see that there are more drag shows that actually coming up in the Thailand. I think that's because they are pursuing the political power first before they want to create such the cultural in the drag cultural more further away. So, but what happened in Indonesia? I think even though there is a good communication, for example, I do agree that there are a lot of information like Lamington Cabinet or Kabaret, I mean, or maybe pesantren al-fatah who is of pesantren transgender or etc. But this kind of information do not receive into the majority because majority still see them as the villain. We do not have we do not have political power at the very first place, and we are still growing up on it and pushing the agenda only put the popularized on the problematic mainstream media. For example, like I'm so sorry, this is boring to be really hurt. Mungkin transgender who is chasing om or etc. And that's what we do not want to see it. We do not want this drugs or etc. that is problematic and able to gain to the media become more problematic and then and pursue the majority to think that drag, trans, and etc. and the LGBTQ communities are harmful and we do not want them to be us. We do not want to push the stereotyping to further away and make our political more or less and less influenceable. So because in Indonesia, I think I can bet that you will know that people know transgender, people know about the bad sides of transgender and drag race like RuPaul's that is bad stereotyping, but they do not know Raminten Kabaret, which is have the stable job for the trans and drags and the pesantren of transgender, because this kind of this kinds of discussion only limited only for the trans itself. If they want to win the debate, they have to know why this discussion, and it's okay for them to pursue even if the majority is conflicted to you, because we think that if majority is still conflicted to you and there's no changes in that, it will harmful, because first you push the current status quo that is not changing for the drag performers that have unstable job, unstable safety, being stigmatized and also being social punished. But second, you do not get the healthy discussion over it because you are pushing them from making bad stereotypings, because there are no political movement at the very first place. So I think that our stance are clear that we want to make political stance first before we make drag cultures like what first and second speaker are saying. That's why we are proud to be GOV. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. To continue the case coming from opposition, we welcome opposition whip. Here.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yep, audible and visible.
Thank you. Wait. Oh. Yeah. Gender pronoun she, her. PLI preference chat box. Okay, wait. mild trigger warning, might be talking about some sensitive stuff. Right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I am a jobless queer person, but would I blame that to the rise of like drag culture in media? I think it's really unfair when like all of proposition has been talking about and like in this their whole argument is two things, right? Basically the idea of like politics and also the idea about how it like affects jobs and stuff like that. I think first of all, it's very unfortunate that they didn't engage with us at all on the topic of like identity, on the topic of discussion, and especially on the topic of fostering a community. Because if we're gonna talk about drag culture, that is literally the whole point of drag. It's about having it's about like flourishing in your identity. It's about having a good community that supports you. It's about having like people to know you and be visible, even to some extent like them mentioning, which I think this is quite offensive, yeah, coming from government, by mentioning that the idea is that, oh, drag is like a performance and you have to be radical, you have to be like super like exaggerated, whether you're a drag queen or a drag king. But first of all, I think the idea, this is like exactly the stigma that they're trying to like champion in their idea, because drag is a spectrum. It's not always talking about like, oh, you have to be like a person with wig and like tons of makeup to be considered as drag. It is a part of your identity. So when they come here and mentions that like, oh, you feel burnt out because you're in a constant state of performing, I think exactly the rise of drag culture in mainstream media proves it wrong to you, because these people, they come to mainstream media fully dressed in their drag, or they come into mainstream media talking about their drag houses, talking about their drag mothers. It shows to them that actually this is my life. I'm not performing or I'm not entertaining anyone. Like this is how I want to live, and this is like what the mainstream media should know, right? So first of all, clarification on that. But also, then moving on to the idea about like political, I think I'm just gonna like settle this out down for one. First of all, there has never been mentioned in our speech, or even like mentioned in their speech, why inherently the penetration of drag culture into mainstream media is on the goal of like pursuing political power, right? Because what came from the first argument from them is that the political climate is not ready for it. But just because political climate is not ready doesn't mean that our goal or their goal is trying to pursue any political power. But even if they try to pursue any political power, or even if it is in the goal of the drag culture by penetrating like media rise, I think government also doesn't have any counterfactual on what they are trying to do. Because if we just compare to like why we should regret this, by regretting, I mean, I think like what we visualize is that basically you as a person in the drag culture, or a person in like, yeah, who support drag community, you wouldn't support the drag shows in mainstream media. You wouldn't try to actively pursue mainstream media slots. You wouldn't attend interviews. You wouldn't put your shows up in TikTok, Instagram, social media, because you want to keep it for the community. I wonder what political power are you gaining from this? Because first of all, drag is inherently political. So whether we're gonna talk about like the political climate is ready or not, drag itself is already a political activity you're doing, because it shows that you are not afraid of people bashing you. You are actually proud of your identity, which is a political identity to some extent about being queer, right? But also too, on the idea that like what Owl has mentioned, the political climate is not that monolithic anymore. Sure, the majority is conservative, but there are political parties that are willing to fight for the rights of queer people. Like exactly in America, where they're trying to pass laws about like transgender, where in your passport and your legal documents you should have your actual gender to be put on like the documents. Like people have been fighting against that, and it's actually a majority fight. Because so I think people need to realize that this is a thing that's happening. But even if they want to talk, but that's America, like it's different in Indonesia. Like also in Indonesia there has been a progression. This is exactly why we can talk about this motion, because people are being more woke, and people are being more sensitive towards queer culture or even identities as a thing, right? So I think it's unfair to just immediately say, you know what, like people will hate on you, people will like push you down, people will shut you up, because I think there is a counterfactual to that exists in the current narrative. But also too, on the idea later on, so still just engaging on the political power. I think exactly the moment that you want to fight for political power, which I think is still not on our goal, because our goal is still just to include like queer people and create a safer community, which I think should be the most important thing in the debate. But if we still want to have more political power. The moment you gain political awareness is when you become visible to the people that hate you, right? Yeah. Because let's say, like back then, when people are racist towards black people, because black people are shut down from the community, you are made as slaves. You are made as like people who are like second-grade citizens, and that's why white people feel so comfortable talking shit about black people, or like being actively racist, because they don't see these people as human. They see them as just people who are hidden in like the society. I think it's exactly what happens to what queer, especially before the Stonewall movement, because what happens is that queers are forced to like hide themselves, are forced to like hide in like behind like straightness and behind lavender marriage, just in order to show that, oh yeah, I should be accepted to society. But the moment you try to be on mainstream media is the moment exactly where these people who hate on you will retake themselves, because you prove that you are actually as human as them, and you are actually engaging to society as them. Yeah, POI. Hello?
Okay, sorry. Okay. I think in our side of the house, I don't think we do not have the representation, but we think we want to make a casual demonstrate that is more holding the political parties such as Rainbow and etc. that happening in Jakarta and etc. We think the representation is exists in our side of the house.
Okay, I get it. So why cannot demonstration also happen in like rise of queer culture in mainstream media? Because I think if you want to gain more power through demonstrations, it's exactly the momentum of having in mainstream media, because you can actively promote, just like RuPaul when he got invited to Jimmy Fallon, he was actively advocating for like, oh yeah, the drag queens, they actually also have like a certain political agenda. They want to be included into society. I think the exact moment is that the only exclusivity of you gaining more visibility can only exist under outside. But then moving on to what is the actual engaging conversation that should be expected from a queer in mainstream media, right? So first, on the idea of how later on it creates a safer community and creates like a better engagement overall towards like the idea of drag and the idea of identity. I think the exact moment these things are invited into mainstream media, the main characterization obviously is that it is not forced, right? Drag exists in mainstream media not because like someone forced them, but because people enjoy drag. People actually see it as a form of art. That's why House of Ramintan is like always sold out at every Saturday night, because people appreciate this form of art. So when it gets engaged as a form of art, it is exactly the moment where like it is seen as something that is beautiful, and it is seen as something inherently linked towards the queer culture, right? Because that is what is trying to be explained by these people going into mainstream media. I mean, like to some extent, like reality shows also show that. So this is the exact moment where there is gonna be a safer community that also enhances. Like I think even to touch on the subject of jobs, this is also the moment where like these queer people or like drag kings and queens especially can promote themselves as entertainers, performers, and anything that they do, and that's why we proudly oppose.
Okay, thank you for that opposition whip. To close the case coming from opposition, we welcome opposition reply. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, audible.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. Three biggest mistakes coming from proposition team. Firstly, their whole argument based on the backlash that this drag community will get when they are going to like this mainstream media. But the rise, at the end of the day, we told you that the rise itself coming from not forcing by all. These people want to like engage more in media mainstream, etc. But it is continuously rising because it is something that people likes, because it pushes more community to like coming and etc. because people likes it in the very first place. But second of all, their argumentation about overshadowing queer community is questionable, because the question then becomes, why if drag culture is not rising, then suddenly the other spectrum, LGBTQI like gay and etc. will have more spotlights? This is something that have not been explained well under their side of the house. But thirdly, about political power, it is something that uncharitable burden at all, because under both sides of the house, queer people existing. And why this is something that better under their side of the house, meanwhile under their side of the house, they also have no political power. Two clashes. Firstly, about the acceptance of society, but second of all, about the political power. Firstly, acceptance from society. I think several observations. They say that, oh, conservative people access and it is backfire the internal of community and etc. The problem of this argument is three level. Firstly, there is no comparative why it is better under the side of the house. Meanwhile, drag people still existing and they're still like using the social and etc. in order to communicate and etc. Means under the side of the house, the backfire coming from conservative people still exists anyway. But second of all, no counterfactual in the very first place. Because why oppression under your side of the house is comparatively better? Because like what Kak Suci already said, they still perform, they still exist and also seen by society. But thirdly, it is not charitable because conservative at best exists on both ways. It is too big burden to like, oh, acceptance for everyone, etc. What we told you at least, we told you that the culture is something that complex. We want people to understand it is something not only about performances, it is something more than that, and cater to gray area to understand this even more. But second of all, they say that, oh, it is like overshadowing other spectrum and etc. How to weigh yes? We think we give more likelihood and also context, like what people right now, even the most conservative people, perceive. And this is something that rising people do not like acknowledge and also validate and etc. because it is something that in the same umbrella. But thirdly, the stigma about burnout, performing, and etc. It is their identity and also their daily life. It is their value. I don't think this is something that charitable to say, oh, they're burnt out and etc. Because it is like me being just me, and why then I am burnt out to be like Raka every day. They're opening up more community at the end of the day, right? But second of all, about political power. This clash is quite unique because proposition force us to talk about this. The biggest argument under the side of the house is political power of drag queen is non-existence. This will be criminalized and etc. What we said at least, the prerequisite to gain political power is by support from the community. Knowing that drag community is better, empathy, and also advocacy that existing. Political power, it's not monolithic right now. It comes with spectrum. In Indonesia, even like more people progressing right now. That's why IWGM exists. This is something that we need to understand at the very first place. Just because political power do not ready yet, doesn't mean that we need to wait. Because the change existing, because you're trying to like familiarity of these things to your community. Like claiming your own culture, showing to the other culture and also general public that your culture is something that normal, that already been used by society. So there is no like excuses in order to like criticize you just becoming yourself because all of your culture has been like using by the other people and etc. We proudly to oppose.
Okay, thank you for that opposition reply. To close the whole debate, we welcome government reply. Here.
Okay, check. Am I clear?
Yep, audible.
Okay, thank you. Ending my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel. So this debate has been about whether the rise of drag culture in mainstream media has helped or harmed the LGBT or the queer community and wider society. The opposition claim that it's a symbol of progressive visibility and also representations of this community. We on government, we have shown that while visibility may have increased, but the form and intent of this visibility is deeply problematic, shallow, and also often harmful. There are 3 points I will talk about. The first one is about the visibility and also like the exploitations. We say that drug culture makes the queer community more visible. Opposition say that the culture make a queer community more visible and acceptance. We say that not all visibility is a good visibility. What we have today is not meaningful visibility. It is entertainment driven, corporate filtered, and also exaggerated. The drag that we see in the mainstream media is used to as a tool entertain cheesehead audience, and not uplift the community. It represents the narrow fashions of a queer community that is loud, flashy, and marketable, while ignoring the real struggles of the trans people, non-binary people, or others whose experience are not TV worthy or media mainstream worthy. We want to discuss because we show that the type of visibility matters, and this visibility does more harm than good by enforcing stereotypes and reducing complexity identities into performance. The second point is about the representations and also erasure. The opposition say that drug culture represents their community, right? We argued it actually overrepresents one part of the drag queens while erasing the misrepresenting others. When drag becomes the face of queerness in media, people wrongly assume that all queer are people like that. That leads to misunderstanding and also like a lack of empathy for queer people who don't fit this mold. Trans people, lesbian, asexuals, and other are get pushed aside in a public discourse. We win this class because like basically we explain to you how this overrepresentation creates this stuff's public understanding and actually weakens the inclusivity within the queer narratives. And also we'll talk about the celebrations also commodifications, right? So the opposition say the drag culture celebrates queerness and open space for self-expression. We respond that in reality, mainstream drag has been commercialized and commodified. This is not longer about the community beliefs or even survival. It is about profits because when they're coming into the mainstream media platform like we already said, the queer stories for views while doing nothing to protect the performance to address the systemic issues like homophobia, mental health, or economic equality. Drag performers may gain fame, but rarely gains real security or rights. Meanwhile, corporations profits during the Pride months and finish work. We win this clash because we show that what looks like celebration is actually like exploitation, and it leaves the queer community to be misrepresented. This is exactly our main point in our main arguments that we want this community to get safety at the very first place. We want them to get reassurance first before they're really entering the mainstream media. So even if after they coming into mainstream media, discussion will be healthy, people will get more acceptance to them because they know they're safe and they're protected at the end of the day, right? So by the end of this debate, it's not about the whether the drag is good or bad. It's about whether the rise in the mainstream media has helped or harmed this community and also movement and the broader society. We've proven to you that this rise has led into shallow and also commercialized visibility, misinterpretations of a queer identity, exploitations, and also like a dangerous illusions. That's why we're so proud to be government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for that amazing debate. Just give me like 10 to 15 minutes for me, Steffi, and Karin to do our deliberation. So could all the debaters just stay in this room and me, Steffi, and Karin could go to the separate deliberation room. Thank you, everyone.